going to go over creating a particle emitter. Previously, we created a particle group, and a particle emitter is just another particle system that you could create in sound particles. So we're going to start just by creating an empty project, and I'm going to change the mic system to 5.1. And what we're going to do is we're going to create arrow buys, so just kind of like we're looking at a battlefield and a bunch of arrows are whizzing past us. First of all, I want to explain the difference between a particle group and a particle emitter. So we've worked with particle groups. With a particle group, all particles exist from the beginning through to the end. As opposed to a particle emitter, where particles are created over time. And that's basically the difference between the particle group and a particle emitter. So I'm going to delete the particle group, and I'm going to add the audio files. The default shape for the particle emitter, as well as the particle group, is a torus, which is this ring, which is not really what we want, because we want arrows to be starting here and flying past the microphone. So they'd be flying down past us, past the microphone. So we're going to change the shape that we have here from the torus to a line. Okay, and what that means is we have the particles spread across in this line in front of us. Let's take a look at some of the parameters with line. So you see we have line, we have point A and a point B. Point A is this point to the left. Point B is the point to the right. So let's spread this line out. So this is a battlefield, so it's certainly not going to be, right now it's minus 16 feet and plus 16 feet, so about 32 feet across. That's a little small for a battlefield. We want it to be, let's say, 200 feet. So to do that, we're going to change this minus 16 to minus 100. And for point A, and then for point B, we'll change it to 100. So now we have a 200-foot line that spans across. You'll also notice that the emitter only goes for 4 seconds here, because that's the longest of the arrow buys that we have. So we want to extend this out. So if we go to the properties at the top for the particle emitter, you'll see we have the particle rate. It's creating 10 particles per second, and the duration is 3 seconds. Let's change that to 30 seconds, just so we have enough to cover a full scene. So you notice now particles will be created throughout the whole scene. And let's also adjust the amount of particles being created, because right now we'll have 10 arrows flying by per second. Let's up that a little bit. Let's make that 25. If we play this, okay, we have the arrow buys being created over this amount of time, but they're not necessarily moving. They're just being created in front of us and sitting there. So we want to have them fly by us. So to do that, we need to use a movement modifier, like we did with the particle group. So if we go down to movement modifiers, select the particle emitter, you'll notice we can move the emitter, which is the point where the particles are originating, but that's not really what we want. We want the particles to move. So we're going to choose particle, straight line movement, add velocity. So if we take a look at what we have here, we see our particles are moving away as they're created. However, if we go and take a look at this perspective view, you'll notice they're moving up, down, back, forth, in every direction. That's not really what we want. We want our particles just shooting down towards us. So let's take a look at the parameters for the movement modifier. And you'll notice on our x-axis, it's moving plus minus 10 meters per second. On the y-axis, they're moving plus minus 10 meters per second. And the z-axis, the same thing. The x-axis is left and right. Y-axis is front and back. And the z-axis is up and down. So we don't want movement on all of those planes. We just want movement on the y-plane, the front and back movement. So I'm going to change this to 0. And I'm going to change this to 0, so the x and the z to 0. So now we'll have movement just front and back. We just want it moving from the front to the back. If we notice, you'll see plus minus 10 meters per second. We want to change that to just being minus 10 meters per second. The way we can do that is to click on the change random settings, And here we have the minimum value is minus 10 meters per second. Maximum value is 10 meters per second. We want this to be 0. So now the motion is only going to be front to back. Zoom in so you can see better. So you can see the arrows are moving from front to back. Let's listen to this and see what we get. Okay, so we have a nice sense of movement, but let's add some variation to the sound of the particles. Although we have 25 arrows here, we want more variation in those arrows. So to do that, we'll go down to the audio modifiers, and we're going to add random gain. So what this is going to do is going to give us a random gain for each of the particles that are created of minus 12 dB to 0 dB, which is the level it's at. So we'll go with that. And we're also going to do some pitch variation. So we'll go to time pitch. And for this, we definitely want to change the default. If I click on pitch distribution, the default is minus 12 semitones and plus 12 semitones. We don't really want that much variation because when the arrows get low, they don't quite sound right. And we don't want them to go this high. We're just going to go 3 semitones up. Just a little variation in pitch between them. Okay, so now we're varying both the gain and the pitch of the arrows. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, let's do one more thing, and let's take a look at the distance of the particle emitter from the microphone. I think we're going to move it a little bit closer because I have a feeling the whoosh part of the arrow by is probably happening a little bit before it passes the microphone. We want it to happen when it passes the microphone. So let's go back to the particle emitter and let's look at the Y distance. Right now it's 16 feet. We're going to make it 10 feet. You'll notice now that what happens is point A is a little closer than point B. So we're going to make point B 10 feet as well. So there's a straight line. And let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. Let's try to lessen the amount of particles being created. Let's go to 15. I think it sounds better, a little bit less dense. And finally, let's make the arrows slightly above us. So we would adjust that by going to the z-axis. And let's look at it in the perspective view. And I'm going to make the z-axis for point A and point B 6 feet above us. Okay, so just a quick overview of using a particle emitter. Once again, I'm just going to review the different settings that I created for this. So because we wanted this line of arrows shooting towards us, we chose line as our shape, and we changed point A x-axis and point B axis to 100 foot by 100 foot, which made this line 200 feet across. We also changed the y-axis, so it was about 10 feet away from the microphone. And we changed the z-axis, so it's 6 feet above us, as if the arrows were zooming past above our heads. We added a movement modifier, so the arrows would move from the line where they're created to the back, past us. So we did that by having the x-axis velocity at 0, the z-axis velocity 0, and the y-axis velocity at just minus 10, not plus minus 10. So you would adjust that by clicking on the Change Random Settings button and adjusting the minimum value to minus 10, maximum value to 0. And then we added a random gain of 12 dB and a random pitch of 3 plus, not plus minus, but just plus 3 semitones. So notice the minimum value is 0, and maximum value is 3. In terms of the particle emitter itself, we decided that 15 particles per second is what we'd create, and we set the duration to 30 seconds so we have enough to complete an entire scene. We don't necessarily need 30 seconds, you can make it shorter, it's up to you. So that's just a general overview of the particle emitter.